As I've been working my way through the book of Revelation from the Greek text, we now come to a description of the heavenly Jerusalem. And just a note that I find helpful. This is, again, a note from Breaking the Code by Metzger, where he writes on page 100 uh, in the following description of the city and its magnificence, the author presents at the same time a vision of heaven in a tapestry of symbolism that describes the church triumphant in its perfected and eternal glory. Although John's description of the city, the people of God, is meant to be symbolic, it is nevertheless pictured very precisely. The angel who was talking to John had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and walls, beginning in 21:15. The city measures 1,500 miles in length, in breadth, and in height. But how can a city be a cube? The description is architecturally preposterous and must not be taken with flat-footed literalism. In ancient times, the cube was held to be the most perfect of all geometric forms. By this symbolism, therefore, John wants us to understand that the heavenly Jerusalem is absolutely splendid, with a harmony and symmetry of perfect proportions. Furthermore, he says that the street of the city is pure gold in verse 21. In ancient times, of course, streets were not paved. In the wet season, streets were mud. In dry times, they were dust. What a contrast to that is the New Jerusalem, where the redeemed walk on streets of gold. And the golden city has 12 gates, each made of a huge pearl. The description is magnificently bewildering, and John intends it to be that way, so that in our imagination we may be carried along with the wonder at the splendor of all that God has prepared for his people. So I would like to read this section in the Greek and comment as we go through it in terms of looking at the grammar as well as looking at the description of what John so marvelously is describing. So we pick it up. The city had 12 foundations. That's where we stopped last time. And on them, the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And we also saw 12 gates. And on the gates were the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel, possibly looking at the New Testament and Old Testament saints that will be part of this magnificent eternal city. So we begin at verse 15. Kai ha lalon met amu, e ken mitran kalaman krusun. And the one who was speaking with me had a measuring rod that was of gold, in order that he might measure the city and its walls, and and its gates and its walls. Ha lalon Lalone is from laleo. It's the present participle nominative masculine singular from laleo. So the one speaking with me had. Acon is the aorist indicative active third person singular from echo, a measuring rod of gold. And in order that metreo is the root, metrese is that he might measure, the aorist subjunctive third person singular from metreo, that he might measure the city and its gates and its walls. Then he talks about the city. Kachepales tetragonas ketai, kaitamekas altes, hasan kaitaplatas, kai ametresin tain palin, to kalamo, epistadion dodeca kiliadon, tamekas kaitaplatas, kai ta hupsas autes hasa estin. So the city was lying four square, tetragonas. Ketai is your present indicative middle from kemai to lie, was lying four square. Its length was the same as its breadth. Kaita me ka saltes, hasan kaita platas. And he measured the city with a rod. Kai emetre sen tain palin to kalamo. And emetre sen is from metreo, the aorist indicative active third person singular. He measured the city with a rod, and 12 stadia. The Greek reads epistadion dodeca kiliadon. That is 12,000 stadia. A stadia, as we are thinking about that particular word, is a station about 607 English feet. The city would be about 1,400 miles in each direction. This is a quote from Mounce found in the Linguistic Key to the Greek New Testament by Cleon Rogers and Fritz Roniker. Actually, Dr. Rogers did a translation of Roniker's version, which was in German. And later on, he and his son collaborated and even updated it. I happen to have the older one here in my hand, Linguistic Key to the Greek New Testament. And I want to refer to it as I'm going through this section. Dr. Rogers was my teacher in 1963 when I was in college. And he was not only my Greek teacher, but he was my basketball coach. So it's interesting. I appreciate his wonderful work, as well as what he and his son did, which is a later, even updated work, a wonderful study of the New Testament Greek going back to Reinecker. So, at any rate, a stadia is basically, as we look at it, it measures about 607 English feet, and this is a quote that Rogers makes or alludes to from Mounce, about 1,400 miles in each direction. And notice, furthermore, we move on. The city was then 12,000 stadia, its length and breadth and height are equal, are going to be the same. Ta mekas kai ta platas epi ta hupsas autes issa estin. So the length and breadth and height of it are equal, are the same. So he measured its walls, verse 17. Kai emetresen ta tekos autes. Emetresen is from metreo, the aorist indicative active third person singular. He measured its wall 144 cubits. Hekatan tesarakanta tesaron pekon. That is, the wall was 144 cubits by a man's measure, metran anthropu, ha estin angelu. That is, an angel's. And a cubit, by the way, is roughly the length of a man's forearm, around, and 144 cubits would be again about 14 miles in height. Again, a quote or a reference to Mounce on page 86 of Linguistic Key to the Greek New Testament by Rogers. So the text goes on to say, it's going to describe now what this city is made of. And notice then in verse 18, kai he endomesis tu tekus autes iaspis. Now we're going through the different precious stones. So the foundation endomesin of the wall of the city was adorned with every jewel. And we're going to learn about each one here. First of all, with iaspis, or jasper. And the city, kai he palis crucian katharan, hamoian hualu hualo katharo. So the city was pure gold, and it was like to clear glass, clear as glass. It's interesting as we look at this. Its beauty, its structure, he's describing, and the city was like pure, clean, or clear glass. And then he goes on to continue describing it. The foundation of the city, or the foundation of the wall, he endomesis tu tekus, was of jasper, iaspis, and the city, as we said, was pure like to fine glass, or clear as glass. The foundations then, hoi themeleoi tu tekus, tes paleos, the foundation of the wall of the city was adorned. Kekos me menoi, has been adorned, or were adorned, with every precious jewel. Cosmeo is the root here. It's a perfect passive participle nominative masculine plural. Has been adorned with every precious jewel. And so he's going to go through each one of the jewels. and describe it. The first was Easpis. The first was jasper. I am now going to be reading some of the notes on page 861 of Dr. Cleon Rogers' notes here that I felt were very good. So, some was of jasper, and then sapphire or sapphire. So we have jasper the first, and then secondly we have ha butyros sapphiros or sapphiros, which is sapphire. Sapphire or sardus carnelian. This was a blood red stone and was commonly used for engraving. This is on page 861 of Rogers. And he is referring for this information to Mounce and Ford, the commentators. And then he goes on, the second was sapphire. Then we come to the third, or sapphiros. Ha tretas chalcedon. So the third was chalcedon. And what is chalcedon? Well, again, following the agate, following Rogers here on page 861. This gem is taken to be of a green color, and he alludes to Charles in his commentary on Revelation and Ford. And so then we move on to the next. The fourth then was, notice, ha tetartas smaragdas, smaragdas. So the fourth, looking at the definition of the fourth here, was and second here. The fourth was well, I'm struggling to see where he deals with that one. Let me go on. The fifth was sardonyx. The sixth was carnelian. The seventh crystallite. The eighth beryl, and the ninth topaz, and the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. So going back then to the Greek here, the fifth was sardonyx, and that's onyx. This was a layered red stone, or stone of red and white. It was prized for use in making cameos, and Mounce points this out. The next, the fifth, sardonyx, sardis or carnelian. This was a blood red stone and was commonly used for engraving. Again, a reference back to Mounce and Ford. All of this on page 861. The next, ha hectos sardion, and we referred to that just a minute ago. Ha heptamas chrysalisas. So the seventh was chrysolite, and this is a gold stone, a topaz. The ancients seem to have used this term for the yellow topaz. Again, a reference is made to Charles N. Ford. The next, the eighth, ha agdaas berulas. Berulas, beryl, this was a green stone ranging from transparent sea green to opaque blue. A reference again to Ford and Mounts. The next, ha enatas topazion. So the next would be topaz, which was a greenish yellow or gold. In ancient times, it was often used in the making of seals and gems. Again, referencing Ford and Mounts at this point. The next was Krusap Prasas, and we have, what is that? This is an apple green, finely grained hornstone, a variety of quartz highly translucent, a reference to Ford. And the next, ha enatas, excuse me, let me go down here. The next was ha indakatas huakenthas. That is Jacinth. It was a bluish purple stone and similar to the modern sapphire. Again, a quote from Mounts. And then the next is ha dodekatas amethustas. So amethustas is a variety of quartz in color clear, transparent purple or bluish violet. It's got its name from being regarded as antidote for drunkenness. Again, a quote from Mounts and Ford. The New Bible Dictionary can also give a summary of some of these precious stones that appear here in the Apocalypse of Revelation. So then we continue. Kai hoi dodeca pulones dodeca margaritai. That is, and the 12 gates were 12 pearls, and ana haste hekastas ton pulonon. That is, and the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl. And so ana haste hekastas ton palonon ein ex henas margaritu. So each was made of a single pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, transparent as glass. Kai he platea tes palaos crucian katharan hos hualas de alges. So the street of the city was pure gold, transparent as glass. And we described that just a minute ago in quoting the reference that we made in Breaking the Code, that the streets were normally mud or dust. And so he's describing something that is just wonderful, that is beautiful. And I think that's the focus he's trying to make. It's interesting. I appreciated again what Metzger writes on page 101 when he says the Golden City has 12 gates, and each made of a huge pearl. And how bewildering this is and wonderful. Jerusalem the Golden. If they were to be read with any degree of understanding, the great medieval hymn, Jerusalem the Golden, they would come to see how perfectly a poet can use material figures to express spiritual meaning. And I appreciated Bernard's poem, Jerusalem the Golden, with milk and honey blessed, beneath thy contemplation sink heart and voice oppressed. I know not, what joys await us there, what radiancy of glory, what bliss beyond compare. O sweet and blessed country, the home of God's elect, O sweet and blessed country, the eager hearts expect. Jesu, in mercy bring us to that dear land of rest, who art with God the Father and Spirit ever blessed. This is Bernard's poem, and I'm quoting from Metzger again on page 101 on contempt of the world, and it's describing the beauty of what will be within the gates of that New Jerusalem. There will be no more jealousy, scandal, strife, no more worldliness, and this is just evil is all banished, and pure worship and true love will order all. And I appreciated that comment. So I'm going to stop there as we end this section of Revelation.